Hi, this is Bruce Lemieux with the Lemieux team. In this video, I want to talk about the HUD1. The HUD1 is a document that summarizes all of the details related to a home sale or home purchase. It's standard across the U.S. and everything's on it. It's got loan charges, purchase price, attorney fees, everything's on it. I talk about the HUD1 a lot and with my buyers and sellers, and sometimes they don't know what I'm talking about. So I think the best way to kind of get you up to speed on a HUD1 is to actually walk through an example, and soon you will be a HUD1 pro. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's take a look at the first page of our HUD1. This particular settlement was conducted by Village Settlements. They are fantastic. I use these guys a lot. Highly recommend them. First section here gives you information about the borrower, the seller, the lender, and the property address. Down here at the bottom we'll also see the settlement date. That's the date the ownership moves from seller to buyer. Then we'll see two columns, a summary of the borrower's transactions and a summary of the seller's transactions. Let's first take a look at the borrower side. First section here we'll see the contract price. The settlement charges of $30,000 are detailed on the second page of the HUD1. We'll come back to that. Adjustments for items paid by seller. This is typically property tax and HOA items. And again, these would be items that the seller has paid in advance of the settlement. Here the buyer is crediting the seller just over $2,700 for property taxes. Add all that up, you'll get a total amount due from the borrower. Okay, now we'll take some money off of this. The first item of $20,000, that is the escrow deposit that the buyer gave at the time of contract ratification. $705 would be principal for the new loans. We see Village Settlements giving us a credit for $100. Here towards the bottom, the seller credit. This particular credit is for home inspection items. Had the seller given the buyer other credits with a contract, those would be shown here. Add all that up, you get the total paid for by the buyer, less amount due, and we'll get at the very bottom, we'll get the total cash from the buyer that's required at settlement in order to purchase the property. Okay, so that's the summary of the buyer side. Let's take a look at the details on page 2 for the buyer. Okay, there's 7 areas of charges here on the detail sheet of the HUD1. This first section is for brokerage fees. Typically we don't see anything for the buyer except perhaps a nominal transaction fee, which we see here. $800, these will be loan-related charges. We see the appraisal fee, we see the underwriting fee, and again, any fee that the lender will charge the buyer in order to set up the loan. Section 900, this will be items paid in advance as required by the lender. Here we see interest for part of the month. Mortgage insurance premium, this is actually a FHA loan, that's why we see that item. And then 1 year's worth of hazard insurance paid in advance. This next section is to set up the escrow accounts that the lender will pay on the buyer's behalf for insurance and interest. Title charges, the settlement attorney is going to do a number of things to make sure the title can transfer cleanly from seller to buyer. So we'll see a few charges related to that. And then on title insurance is the largest item, and that protects the buyer against any issues with the title after settlement. $1,200, government recording and transfer charges. In Montgomery County, the total transfer and recordation charge for Montgomery and Maryland is around 2.2 to 2.5% of the purchase. That is traditionally split between buyer and seller, and that's what we see here. And the last section, additional charges, we'll see the buyer had a survey for $900, home warranty, and add it all up, they have just over $30,000 in charges, which we saw on the page 1 summary. Now let's take a look at the seller charges. $400, we'll see the sales price for $718,000. Below that, we'll see the credit that the buyer's given the seller for property taxes paid in advance. Add all that up, will give you a gross amount due to the seller. Seller then has settlement charges of just over $47,000, which we'll detail on the next page. If the seller has a mortgage or other loans on the property, which is typical, you'll see those items listed here. This particular seller did not have any loans on the property, that's why we don't see any entries. Line 508, first half of real estate taxes. This really just came up due to the timing of this particular settlement. 1/2 of the year's taxes were due close to settlement, so the settlement company took it out, but then as we saw in line 407, most of that was credited back to the seller. A wire fee to transfer those proceeds to the seller's bank account. Then we'll see some adjustments, $200 water escrow. Here we'll see the $1,250 credit to the buyer for home inspection items. Add all that up with the total reductions to the seller and the amount due, and we'll get total proceeds to the seller at settlement of just over $668,000. Now let's take a look at the second page for the seller side. First section for sales broker commission. This is the largest single item on the HUD1, and that would be for brokerage fees to sell the property. Sections 800, 900, and 1000 all have to do with the buyer's loan, so we see no charges to the seller for those items. Title charges, seller has a nominal fee going to the settlement company to prepare for settlement. Line 1200, government record and transfer charges. Again, we'll see 1/2 of the transfer and recordation charges that the seller's picking up. Add all that up and we'll get a total charge of just over $47,000, which we saw on the first page. Okay, so there you go. That is an example of a HUD1, so hopefully that gives you a better idea of the details associated with a home sale or home purchase. Probably the last thing I would add, when you are going to go to closing, I always get a draft HUD1 for my buyers and sellers in advance of the settlement so that you can walk through each of these charges in detail, and if there's something on here that you don't like or you don't understand, that gives you ample opportunity to get answers from your loan officer or from the settlement attorney, and then as you go into settlement, you'll be in good shape. Got any questions, give us a call and be glad to help. Thanks for watching.